When the last wolf in the valley died beneath the falling snow, the kingdom celebrated as though a war had finally ended. Church bells rang from distant villages. Bonfires burned long after sunset. Mothers smiled without fear. Fathers raised their cups toward the mountains, believing the ancient nightmare had finally been buried. Only one young woman walked away from the celebration. While everyone else called the wolf a monster, she saw something no one else had cared to notice. 3 days later, the mountains began to shake. The cliffs split apart. Ancient wolves returned from the forgotten forests. And somewhere beneath the sleeping earth, a promise older than the kingdom itself awakened once more. No one understood why. Not yet. But the answer had been placed beneath a lonely pine tree by the gentle hands of a woman who chose kindness over fear. Winter ruled Ashen Hollow with quiet determination. Snow rested upon every rooftop like folded white blankets, soft enough to hide the rough edges of old timber houses, yet heavy enough to remind everyone that another harsh season had arrived. Thin streams had frozen into ribbons of glass, and smoke drifted lazily from crooked chimneys carrying the comforting scent of burning cedar and warm bread. Life in the little mountain village followed the same rhythm it had for generations. Before sunrise, shepherds climbed the hills with their flocks. Blacksmiths filled the crisp air with the steady ringing of iron. Children chased one another across icy paths until worried mothers called them back indoors before darkness settled over the valley. Beyond the last wooden fence stood the black peaks. The mountains watched everything. Their towering cliffs disappeared into clouds that almost never moved, as though the sky itself feared disturbing whatever slept above. No hunter willingly climbed those slopes after sunset. No traveler crossed the northern pass alone. Every child in Ashen Hollow grew up hearing the same story. The beast of Black Peak was always watching. The great silver wolf. A monster older than memory. Some claimed it devoured entire caravans. Others whispered that it summoned winter wherever its paws touched the earth. Whenever livestock disappeared or storms destroyed crops, frightened voices always blamed the wolf. No one questioned the stories. Fear had become tradition, and traditions were rarely challenged. Except by one person. Her name was Mira. She lived in the smallest cottage at the edge of the village beside her aging mother, the healer everyone simply called Mother Ellen. Their home smelled of dried herbs, pine needles, and fresh bread instead of expensive perfumes or polished wood. Bundles of lavender hung from the ceiling. Clay jars lined every shelf. Strings of mountain flowers dried beside the fireplace, waiting to become medicines when spring finally returned. Mira had inherited her mother's gentle hands. She could remove a thorn from a frightened fox without being bitten. She could calm frightened horses simply by resting her forehead against theirs. Even injured birds seemed to stop struggling whenever she whispered softly to them. People appreciated her kindness when it helped them. They mocked it when it did not. "You spend more time healing wolves than listening to people," one merchant often laughed. Mira would simply smile. There is room enough in the world for both. She never argued. Kindness did not need loud voices. It only needed steady hands. That morning began like countless others. She gathered herbs beneath frost-covered pines while the pale sun slowly climbed above the eastern cliffs. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Even the sparrows seemed reluctant to sing. A sudden echo drifted through the valley. Not thunder. Not falling stone. A hunting horn. Then another. Then another. The sound rolled across the snow-covered mountains until every villager lifted their heads. They found it, someone whispered. Doors swung open. People hurried toward the village square. Curiosity spread faster than the cold. Mira followed more slowly, carrying her basket against her chest. The crowd had already gathered when she arrived. Children climbed wagons for a better view. Old men leaned upon walking sticks. Women stood shoulder to shoulder, covering their mouths with woolen scarves against the icy wind. Then the soldiers appeared. 8 horses pulled a heavy wooden sled. Iron chains scraped against frozen ground. Every step sounded painfully slow. The cheering began before anyone could clearly see what rested upon the sled. "We're free. The monster is dead. Long live the king." The voices grew louder with every passing second. Mira remained silent. The soldiers stopped in the center of the square. Captain Garrick dismounted first. His black armor reflected the weak winter sunlight, while a crimson cloak fluttered sharply behind him. His face showed neither joy nor pride, only satisfaction. He turned toward the crowd. The beast of Black Peak has fallen. Cheers exploded like breaking waves. Men embraced each other. Women cried with relief. Children threw handfuls of snow into the air. 2 soldiers pulled away the heavy canvas covering the sled. Silence followed. Even the cheering stopped. The wolf was enormous. Its silver fur shimmered beneath a layer of melting frost. Its paws were larger than dinner plates. Old scars crossed its shoulders like faded rivers carved into stone. A broken spear still rested between its ribs. Blood had frozen dark against its chest. Yet nothing about the creature looked savage. Its face remained peaceful. Its eyes were closed. Its jaws rested gently upon the wood as though sleep had finally claimed a traveler who had wandered far too long. No curled lips. No exposed fangs. Only silence. Children cautiously approached. One little boy picked up a stone. His father nodded proudly. The stone struck the wolf's shoulder with a dull thud. Another followed. Then another. Laughter spread through the square. Someone spat onto the sled. The devil deserves worse. Myra's fingers tightened around the basket until dried leaves crumbled beneath her grip. Something felt terribly wrong. She stepped closer despite the crowd. Her eyes wandered across the wolf's body. She noticed details no one else cared to see. Deep wounds surrounded both front legs. Not claw marks. Metal scars. Old chain wounds. Thick calluses circled the neck beneath layers of silver fur. She gently brushed away frozen snow. An iron collar remained hidden beneath the fur. Rust had nearly swallowed it. The metal looked ancient. Older than anyone living. A prisoner. Not a monster. Her breathing slowed. The story she had heard since childhood suddenly felt strangely hollow. If this beast had terrorized kingdoms for centuries, who had chained it? Who had imprisoned something powerful enough to frighten an entire realm? Captain Garrick noticed her staring. "What are you looking at?" She hesitated. "The collar." Several soldiers laughed. A beast is easier to control with chains. Myra looked back at the wolf. "No." Her voice remained soft. "This wasn't placed there yesterday." Garrick's smile disappeared. "It no longer matters." He motioned toward his men. "Drag it beyond the eastern cliffs." One soldier frowned. "Should we burn it?" Garrick shook his head. "Leave it for the crows." The villagers nodded approvingly. Justice had been served. The crowd slowly dispersed, already speaking about festivals, safer roads, and better harvests. Only Myra remained standing beside the empty square after everyone else had gone. Snowflakes drifted quietly onto the wolf's motionless body. Mother Ellen approached beside her. "I know that look." Myra never lifted her eyes. "They're wrong." Her mother sighed. "Perhaps." They never even wondered who chained him. For a long moment, neither woman spoke. Finally Mother Ellen reached into Myra's basket and removed a bundle of white winter lilies. "If your heart refuses to leave him here." She gently placed the flowers back into Myra's hands. "Then don't." The afternoon sky darkened as thick clouds gathered above the mountains. By the time the last soldier disappeared beyond the village gates, Myra had borrowed an old wooden cart. Most people watched from their windows. Some whispered prayers. Others crossed themselves. A few laughed openly. "She's burying the monster. She'll bring the curse back. No good ever comes from pity." Myra answered none of them. She wrapped heavy cloth around the wolf's wounds before slowly pulling the great body onto the cart. The weight nearly overwhelmed her. Every step through the snow demanded every ounce of strength she possessed. The wheels sank into drifts. Cold wind pushed against her face until tears formed at the corners of her eyes. Not from sadness. From the biting air. The climb toward Black Peak lasted until twilight. No birds sang. No wolves howled. Only the steady crunch of boots through untouched snow echoed between silent trees. At last she reached an ancient pine standing alone upon a rocky ridge. Its branches stretched wide despite countless winters. The ground beneath it remained strangely free of deep snow, as though the tree had guarded that place for centuries. Mira stopped. She somehow knew this was where he belonged. She dug until her hands blistered. The frozen earth resisted every strike of the shovel. Hours passed. Darkness slowly settled across the mountains. The moon rose behind drifting clouds, covering the world in pale silver light. At last the grave was deep enough. With trembling muscles and exhausted breaths, she lowered the great wolf into the earth. She arranged the white lilies across his chest. The ancient iron collar caught the moonlight one final time. Carefully, she removed it. It crumbled apart the moment it touched the air, dissolving into reddish dust that disappeared upon the wind. Mira stared quietly. No ordinary metal vanished like that. She gently covered the wolf with earth until only smooth snow remained. Then she searched among fallen branches and carved a small wooden wolf with a knife her father had once carried. It was simple, rough, far from perfect. She placed it at the head of the grave. "I don't know who you truly were," she whispered into the cold night. "But no living soul deserves to be forgotten like this." The mountain answered with silence. Then, a faint vibration passed beneath her boots. Tiny flakes of snow slipped from nearby branches. The pine needles trembled. Far away, deep beneath the sleeping mountains, something ancient stirred. Mira slowly lifted her head. The wind had completely stopped. Every sound had vanished. Even the forest seemed to be holding its breath. And somewhere beyond the darkness, a single wolf howled. Not with sorrow, but with recognition. The howl lingered in the frozen air long after the sound itself had faded. Mira remained beside the lonely grave, her breath drifting like pale smoke beneath the moonlight. Every instinct urged her to run back to the safety of the village, yet her feet refused to move. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt watchful. Then, as quietly as it had begun, the trembling beneath the earth stopped. The ancient pine stood motionless once again. Snow settled softly over the fresh grave, covering every trace of disturbed earth until it looked as though no one had ever been there. Only the small wooden carving remained, standing alone against the endless white. Mira lowered her eyes. Perhaps she had imagined it. Perhaps exhaustion had played tricks on her mind. She pulled her cloak tighter around her shoulders, gave the grave one final glance, and began the long walk home beneath a sky crowded with cold stars. Morning arrived with a sky the color of silver ash. The village awoke before sunrise, not because of roosters or church bells, but because the mountains were groaning. At first the sound resembled distant thunder. Low, heavy, slow. Then the ground gave a gentle shiver. Clay cups rattled across kitchen tables. Dust drifted from wooden beams. Water inside buckets rippled without a single breath of wind. People hurried outside. They stared toward the black peaks. The mountains stood exactly where they always had. Yet something had changed. Thin lines now crossed the cliffs like fresh scars stretching from the highest ridges toward the forests below. Nobody spoke. Even the loudest children clung quietly to their parents. "It was only a small tremor," an old farmer finally muttered. "The mountain settles after heavy snow." Others nodded eagerly. Simple answers felt safer than frightening ones. Life continued. Or at least everyone pretended it did. 3 days passed. The shaking returned every morning. Never enough to destroy houses. Never enough to send villagers fleeing. Only enough to remind them that something beneath the mountains had begun to breathe again. The changes became impossible to ignore. Streams that had flowed east for generations suddenly bent north without explanation. Ice melted around ancient stones that had remained buried beneath snow for centuries. Huge cracks appeared across forgotten hillsides, revealing weathered staircases carved into solid rock. Children discovered strange symbols etched into exposed stone pillars. No one remembered who had built them. No one even knew they existed. The elders grew uneasy. "The mountains are uncovering old memories," whispered one gray-haired woman. No one laughed at her. Mira noticed something stranger than all the rest. Every morning, before the first sunlight touched her window, Enormous paw prints surrounded her cottage. Not one trail. Many. Some larger than horses. Some no bigger than hunting dogs. The tracks circled the little house once before disappearing into untouched snow. There were never signs of struggle. Never claw marks. Never broken fences. Only silent footprints. Her mother knelt beside one of them. The impression was deep enough to swallow both of her hands. "They're watching you." Mira looked toward the forest. "But why?" Mother Ellen slowly stood. "I don't think they're hunting." Neither woman finished the thought that followed. They both felt it. The wolves were waiting. Rumors spread through Ashen Hollow faster than smoke. People who had once smiled at Mira now stepped aside whenever she walked past. Some refused to accept herbs from her. Others quietly shut their doors. Children who had once followed her through the fields now hid behind fences. It started after she buried the beast. "I told you she awakened something. The curse has chosen her." The words reached her ears no matter how softly they were spoken. She never answered. Instead, she continued carrying medicine to the sick. She still repaired broken bird nests. She still left scraps of meat near the forest edge for hungry foxes. Kindness did not disappear simply because others feared it. But loneliness settled over her like another layer of winter snow. On the morning of the fourth day, the sound of horns echoed through the valley. Not hunting horns. War horns. Villagers rushed toward the gates. A column of mounted soldiers entered Ashen Hollow, their black armor polished until it reflected the pale sky. Red banners snapped sharply in the wind. At their head rode Lord Commander Garrick. Unlike the captain who had displayed the wolf's body, Garrick carried himself with absolute authority. His armor was decorated with silver wolves pierced by crimson swords. His face looked carved from stone. Cold. Sharp. Without mercy. His horse stopped in the center of the square. He surveyed the silent villagers before speaking. "Who buried the beast of Black Peak?" No one answered. The silence stretched. Finally, several frightened hands pointed toward Mira. She stepped forward without lowering her eyes. "I buried him." Garrick studied her for a long moment. "So?" His voice remained calm. "The healer's daughter. You honored a cursed creature." "I buried the dead." "You honored a monster." "I buried someone who could no longer defend himself." A murmur spread through the crowd. Garrick's eyes narrowed. "Do you deny disturbing forbidden ground?" "I buried him beneath a pine tree." "Exactly where?" She remained silent. His expression hardened. "The mountains awakened 3 days later." "I don't know why. But you expect us to believe the timing is coincidence." "I only showed mercy." The commander leaned slightly forward in his saddle. "Mercy without wisdom becomes disaster." His words hung heavily over the square. Then he turned toward his soldiers. "Search her home." Mother Ellen stepped forward. "There is no need." 2 soldiers pushed past her. Cabinets opened. Shelves emptied. Clay jars shattered against wooden floors. Bundles of herbs scattered across the cottage. Nothing was spared. Villagers watched in helpless silence. After nearly an hour, the soldiers emerged carrying only ordinary medicines, dried flowers, and old books. No cursed relics. No forbidden magic. Nothing. One soldier quietly shook his head. "Nothing, my lord." Garrick looked disappointed. Which frightened Mira even more. A man searching for guilt rarely accepted innocence. That evening the village gathered inside the old meeting hall. Candles flickered against rough stone walls while anxious voices filled the room. Some demanded Mira be banished. Others argued that angering the commander would bring soldiers back. Only a handful defended her. Mother Ellen stood before them. "My daughter has healed your children." She looked from face to face. "She has sat beside your sick when others stayed away. She has buried your loved ones when storms prevented priests from arriving. Has kindness suddenly become a crime?" No one answered. Fear had stolen their courage. Mira gently touched her mother's arm. "It isn't their fault." Mother Ellen turned toward her. Fear always becomes someone's fault. Long after midnight, unable to sleep, Mira wandered beyond the village. Fresh snow muffled every footstep. The forest seemed brighter beneath the full moon. She followed a narrow trail until she reached a frozen stream. There, sitting beside the ice as though he had expected her, was an elderly monk wrapped in weathered grey robes. His long white beard rested across his chest. A walking staff leaned beside him. He smiled before she spoke. I wondered how long it would take. Mira stopped. Do I know you? No. But someone far older knows you. She frowned. I don't understand. The mountain does. A cold breeze stirred the trees. The monk looked toward the distant peaks. You buried him with respect. I buried a lonely creature. No. His gentle eyes met hers. You buried a king. The words seemed impossible. A king. The last Guardian King. She stared at him. I saw only a wolf. Because that is what he chose to become. The monk slowly rose, leaning upon his staff. Long before your kingdom existed, men and wolves ruled these mountains together. They protected something. What? His face grew solemn. A prison. The wind suddenly strengthened. Snow drifted across the frozen stream like white mist. The monk continued. There was once a king named Aldren. He loved his people more than his crown. When darkness rose from beneath these mountains, no sword could defeat it. So he surrendered his human life. He became the first guardian wolf. He remained here for centuries. Watching. Waiting. Alone. Mira felt her heartbeat quicken. The chains were placed upon him by frightened kings who forgot why he existed. They feared the Guardian more than the darkness he imprisoned. Her throat tightened. They called him a monster. They always do. Silence settled between them. Then the monk stepped closer. His death broke the final seal. Mira barely whispered. What does that mean? It means the burden he carried alone now belongs to another. She slowly shook her head. No, I'm only a healer. You are the first soul in generations who saw a king where everyone else saw a beast. The monk gently placed one wrinkled hand upon her shoulder. The old spirits noticed. And they have chosen. Before she could ask another question, the mountain roared. Not above them. Below them. The earth lurched violently. Trees bent. Snow exploded from towering cliffs. Birds burst into the sky in frightened clouds. A crack raced across the face of the largest mountain, splitting stone that had stood untouched for thousands of years. The sound echoed across the kingdom like the breaking of the world itself. Far within the darkness of that impossible wound, a single golden light appeared. And for one brief heartbeat, it looked exactly like the eye of a giant wolf opening beneath the mountain. The mountain did not stop shaking when dawn arrived. It trembled through the morning like the slow heartbeat of something unimaginably old. Snow slid from towering cliffs in white rivers. Flocks of birds abandoned their nests all at once, circling wildly above the valley before disappearing toward the southern plains. Even the wind sounded different, carrying a deep, hollow hum that rolled between the peaks. The people of Ashen Hollow no longer tried to explain what was happening. They simply prayed. Some nailed fresh wooden charms above their doors. Others packed wagons in silence, preparing to leave the only homes they had ever known. Fear had settled over the village like another winter. Mira barely slept after meeting the old monk. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the golden light inside the broken mountain. She heard his words again. You buried a king. The thought refused to leave her. She sat beside the small kitchen window as pale morning light crept across the floor. Mother Ellen quietly stirred a pot of barley porridge over the fire. Neither woman spoke for a long time. Finally, Mira broke the silence. If what he said is true. Her mother looked up. Then everything we've believed since childhood was a lie. Mother Ellen slowly placed the wooden spoon aside. When I was a little girl, she said softly, my grandmother used to tell stories that no one else believed. Mira listened. She said wolves once walked beside kings. I thought they were only bedtime stories. So did I. Mother Ellen's eyes drifted toward the mountains. Now I'm no longer certain. The peace lasted only moments. A loud crash echoed outside. Then another. Then shouting. Mira hurried to the door. Black smoke climbed into the grey sky. Several cottages near the eastern road were burning. Villagers ran through the snow carrying buckets of water while frightened children cried behind them. Mounted soldiers stormed through the streets. Garrick had returned. Only this time he had brought an army. Hundreds of soldiers filled Ashen Hollow until every narrow lane echoed with marching boots and clanking armor. Their banners darkened the snowy streets like gathering storm clouds. Garrick rode directly toward the healer's cottage. His face was colder than before. I gave this village a chance. No one answered. He looked at Mira. You met someone last night. Her heart skipped. He knew. I don't know what you mean. His smile was almost invisible. The old monk. Mira remained silent. I've hunted him for 20 years. The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. He spreads dangerous legends. Mother Ellen stepped forward. He spoke only of peace. Garrick's eyes hardened. Peace built upon lies is still treason. He raised one armored hand. Arrest her. 4 soldiers advanced. Before they reached Mira, an elderly shepherd stumbled into the square. His clothes were torn. His face was pale. Wolves. He struggled for breath. The Northern Patrol. His voice cracked. They're all dead. Panic spread instantly. Women pulled children indoors. Men grabbed hunting bows. Soldiers rushed toward the village gates. Garrick turned sharply. Prepare the cavalry. The shepherd grabbed his arm. No. His trembling finger pointed toward the forest. They weren't killed by wolves. Silence. They were. He swallowed hard. Running from something. The first scream came from the northern watchtower. Everyone looked up. A guard stood frozen upon the wooden platform, staring toward the forest. Then he pointed. Dozens of wolves emerged from between the snow-covered pines. Grey wolves. White wolves. Black wolves. Young. Old. Large. Small. More wolves than anyone in the valley had seen in generations. Yet something felt strange. They were not charging. Not growling. Not hunting. They simply walked. Slowly. Calmly. Like silent pilgrims. The entire pack stopped at the edge of the village. Not one crossed the boundary. Not one showed its teeth. The largest among them stepped forward. Its thick white fur shimmered beneath drifting snow. Its pale blue eyes fixed upon Mira. The wolf lowered its massive head. Not in surrender. In respect. Gasps swept through the crowd. Mira stood perfectly still. The wolf remained motionless for several heartbeats. Then it turned. Without a sound, the entire pack disappeared back into the forest. As though they had come for only one purpose. To find her. Garrick's expression darkened. You see. He pointed toward the trees. They obey her. Mira shook her head. No, they don't. You expect us to believe that. I've never seen them before. Liar. He drew his sword. The steel reflected cold morning light. Take her. This time the soldiers reached her. Before anyone could react, an arrow flew from the forest. It struck the snow directly between Garrick's horse and Mira. Not to kill. To warn. Every soldier raised a shield. Another arrow landed. Then another. The forest remained hidden behind curtains of falling snow. No enemy could be seen. Only silence. Then a familiar voice echoed through the trees. Leave the girl. The old monk stepped from the forest carrying only his weathered staff. He looked impossibly calm despite facing an entire army. Garrick laughed. I've searched for you longer than some of these boys have been alive. I know. The monk smiled gently. You've never understood what you were hunting. Garrick pointed his sword. Seize him. The soldiers charged. The monk never fought. Instead, he struck the frozen ground once with his staff. A deep crack raced across the snow. The earth trembled. Not violently, just enough. The soldiers lost their footing. Horses reared in panic. Before anyone recovered, the monk had already reached Mira. "You must leave." She looked back toward her mother. "I can't." "You must. My village will not survive if you stay." Mother Ellen stepped forward. Tears glistened in her eyes. She already understood. "You have to go." Mira shook her head. "I can't leave you." Mother Ellen gently held her face. "When you were little." She smiled through trembling lips. "You cried every time you found an injured bird. You always asked me if kindness could really change the world." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I never knew the answer." She gently kissed Mira's forehead. "I think we're about to find out." Before Mira could speak again, flames erupted from the nearest barn. A soldier had thrown a torch. Then another. Dry timber caught instantly. Fire spread from roof to roof. Smoke swallowed the sky. People screamed. Animals broke free from their pens. Chaos consumed Ashen Hollow. "Gerrick!" The monk shouted. "Innocent people live here." Gerrick never looked toward the burning homes. They chose the witch. They chose their fate. The monk grabbed Mira's hand. "Run." For one terrible moment she hesitated. Her eyes searched desperately for her mother. Mother Ellen stood beside the burning cottage. She smiled. Not because she felt no fear. Because she refused to let Mira's final memory of her become one of despair. "Go." Mira finally turned. Every step away from the village felt like tearing away a piece of her own heart. The monk led her through narrow forest trails hidden beneath ancient pines. Behind them, Ashen Hollow disappeared beneath rising smoke. The bells that once celebrated weddings now rang only to warn of fire. Their mournful echoes followed Mira long after the village vanished behind the trees. They traveled until nightfall. Snow fell steadily around them. The forest grew older with every mile. The trees became enormous, their trunks so wide that 3 grown men could not have reached around them. Soft green moss covered ancient stones. Crystal streams flowed beneath thick sheets of ice. The air smelled of pine resin and frozen earth. At sunset they reached a lonely meadow where a small fire already burned. Beside it sat a boy no older than 15. He wore a patched wool cloak and carried a shepherd's staff far too large for his thin frame. The moment he saw the monk, he stood. "I was beginning to think you weren't coming." The monk smiled warmly. "Mira." He gestured toward the boy. "This is Rowan." The boy nodded politely. "My grandfather told me to wait here." "Where is he?" The smile faded from Rowan's face. "He never came back." Silence settled over the fire. The monk sighed. "The mountains have taken many good people." Rowan looked toward Mira. "They took my family first." He stared into the flames. "My parents disappeared during the first tremors 3 winters ago. I searched every valley. I never found them." His voice remained calm. Too calm. As though grief had frozen inside him long ago. Mira quietly sat beside him. For a while neither spoke. Then she reached into her satchel and handed him a piece of warm bread she had carried since morning. Rowan accepted it with a grateful smile. It was the first smile she had seen since leaving Ashen Hollow. Small. Fragile. Real. Late that night, after Rowan had fallen asleep beside the fire, the monk stared into the dancing flames. "The journey becomes harder from here." Mira looked toward the dark forest. "Where are we going?" "To remember." "I don't understand." He gently fed another branch into the fire. "The world forgot its protectors. Now it must remember them." Far beyond the campfire, a pair of golden eyes watched quietly between the trees. Then another. And another. One by one, silent wolves emerged from the darkness. They formed a wide circle around the camp. None came closer. None made a sound. They simply stood beneath the falling snow, keeping watch until morning. And for the first time in countless generations, the forgotten guardians were no longer guarding a king. They were guarding the woman who had chosen to honor one. Morning arrived without birdsong. The wolves were gone before the first rays of sunlight reached the forest floor. Only their tracks remained, circling the campsite in perfect silence before disappearing into the trees. Mira knelt beside one of the prints. Fresh snow had already begun to soften its edges, yet it was still deep enough to tell the story of an animal far larger than any ordinary wolf. She rested her fingertips inside it. The snow was cold, but beneath it, the earth felt strangely warm. She quickly pulled her hand back. The old monk watched from beside the dying fire. The mountain is waking faster now. Mira looked toward the distant peaks. Can it truly be alive? The monk smiled faintly. Not alive in the way we are. His weathered eyes drifted upward. But some places remember everything. The three travelers continued north. The forest slowly changed around them. The pines grew taller until their branches hid the sky. Thick carpets of emerald moss covered fallen logs untouched for centuries. Ice clung to narrow waterfalls, turning them into walls of crystal that shimmered whenever sunlight slipped through the trees. No roads existed here. No villages. No signs of hunters. Only forgotten wilderness. It felt older than the kingdom itself. Even Rowan, who had spent most of his life among sheep and mountain trails, whispered as though afraid to disturb something sleeping beneath the roots. I've never seen this part of the forest. The monk nodded. Few people have. Why? Because it does not reveal itself to those who come seeking power. Near midday they reached the remains of an ancient stone bridge. Most of it had collapsed into a rushing river long ago, leaving only broken pillars rising from the water like the ribs of a giant buried beneath the earth. Strange carvings covered every stone. Mira brushed snow away with her glove. She expected faded letters. Instead she found wolves. Hundreds of them. Some stood beside crowned kings. Others walked among children carrying baskets of flowers. One carving showed villagers placing food before wolves during a harvest celebration. Another showed wolves pulling sleds through heavy snow while exhausted families followed behind them. Not servants. Not masters. Partners. Rowan stared in disbelief. My grandfather used to tell stories like these. And everyone laughed at him. The monk slowly crossed the bridge. History survives. He looked back at them. Only memory dies. Beyond the bridge the land rose sharply. Towering cliffs surrounded a hidden valley untouched by winter. Mira stopped in amazement. Green grass covered the ground despite the snow-covered mountains above. Bright blue flowers swayed gently beside flowing streams. Butterflies drifted lazily through the air. Warm mist rose from natural springs, filling the valley with the scent of fresh earth and blooming herbs. It felt impossible. Like spring had hidden itself from the rest of the world. Then she saw them. Wolves. Dozens. No. Hundreds. They rested peacefully throughout the valley. Some slept beneath flowering trees. Others drank quietly from the streams. Young pups chased one another through patches of sunlight while older wolves watched with calm golden eyes. None showed fear. None displayed aggression. The moment Mira entered the valley, every wolf lifted its head. Silence settled across the meadow. One enormous grey wolf slowly approached. Its scarred muzzle suggested many battles, yet its movements carried remarkable gentleness. Mira remained still. The wolf stopped only a few steps away. Its nose twitched softly. Then it lowered its great head until it rested against the back of her trembling hand. Warm breath drifted across her frozen fingers. A tear escaped before she realized she was crying. She had spent her whole life hearing that wolves were creatures of endless violence. Yet the first touch she received from one carried only trust. Around them, the rest of the pack slowly lowered their heads as well. Not to surrender. To welcome. The monk smiled quietly. They remember. They remained in the hidden valley until evening. The wolves kept a respectful distance, never crowding the travelers, yet never allowing them to feel alone. One old she-wolf gently nudged a frightened fawn toward Mira after it slipped beside the stream. Another carried fresh rabbit meat to Rowan after noticing the boy's empty pack. No one had trained them. No commands were spoken. Compassion simply moved naturally through the valley. Watching them, Mira understood something she had never imagined. The wolves had not become monsters. People had become strangers to them. As darkness settled over the valley, the monk led them toward a towering cliff hidden behind a curtain of falling water. At first it appeared to be solid stone. Then the wolves gathered before it. The great grey wolf lifted its head and released one long, haunting howl. The sound echoed through the valley. The mountain answered. Stone groaned. Ancient gears hidden somewhere within the earth slowly awakened. The waterfall split apart. Behind it stood an enormous doorway carved directly into the mountain. Torchlight flickered from somewhere deep inside. Warm air drifted outward carrying the scent of old cedar and burning oil. Rowan whispered in disbelief. This place. The monk finished softly. Has been waiting. The halls beyond the entrance stretched farther than the eye could see. Columns wider than ancient oaks supported ceilings lost in darkness. Beautiful mosaics covered the polished stone floors. Golden lanterns still burned despite centuries of silence, their flames untouched by time. Crystal streams flowed through carefully carved channels beside wide walkways. The entire underground city seemed asleep rather than abandoned. Mira walked slowly, almost afraid to breathe. Every wall told another forgotten story. Kings standing beside wolves beneath the northern lights. Queens healing injured animals during great wars. Children placing flower crowns upon playful wolf pups. Harvest festivals where humans and wolves danced around great bonfires beneath autumn skies. No fear. Only friendship. Only belonging. Tears filled Mira's eyes. So much was forgotten. The monk nodded sadly. No. So much was erased. At the center of the underground city stood an enormous circular chamber. Its ceiling opened high above, revealing a narrow circle of stars. Moonlight poured down onto a single stone throne. Unlike every royal throne Mira had ever imagined, this one was simple. No gold. No jewels. Only grey stone carved with running wolves. Before it rested a crystal basin filled with perfectly still water. The monk approached slowly. He knelt. So many years. His voice barely rose above a whisper. So much silence. Mira stepped beside the basin. The water remained perfectly calm. Then, without warning, tiny ripples spread across its surface. Images slowly formed. Not reflections. Memories. She saw a young king with kind eyes walking through snowy forests beside a magnificent silver wolf. The image shifted. The king stood before thousands of frightened people as darkness swallowed the mountains behind him. Another vision followed. The king removed his crown. He knelt before an ancient stone altar. Golden light surrounded him. His body slowly changed. Hands became paws. Hair became silver fur. His eyes remained the same. Filled with compassion. Filled with quiet determination. King Aldren had not been cursed. He had chosen to give away his own humanity so that everyone else could keep theirs. Mira covered her mouth. He sacrificed everything. The monk lowered his head and asked for nothing in return. The vision continued. Century after century passed before her eyes. Kings were born. Kingdoms fell. Forests changed. Still the Silver Guardian remained alone upon the mountains. Watching. Protecting. Waiting. Then came another vision. Soldiers. Chains. Iron collars. Fear. The descendants of those Aldren had protected no longer recognized him. They hunted him. Captured him. Called him monster. Every chain they placed upon him tightened around their own forgotten history. Mira could no longer hold back her tears. He never fought them. No. The monk's voice trembled. He still loved them. Suddenly the crystal water darkened. The peaceful images vanished. A shadow spread beneath the surface. Thick. Black. Endless. It moved like smoke trapped beneath ice. The chamber grew colder. Every lantern flickered. The wolves outside began howling. Not with anger. With warning. The monk's expression changed instantly. It has begun. A distant sound echoed through the underground halls. Metal striking stone. Again. 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 Someone was breaking through the outer gates. Rowan rushed toward the entrance. He returned moments later, breathing hard. "They're here." Mira's heart sank. "Garrick." The monk nodded. "He followed us." The echoes grew louder. Explosions of stone thundered through the hidden kingdom. Dust drifted from the ceiling. Somewhere beyond the ancient halls, soldiers shouted orders. Steel scraped against rock. The forgotten sanctuary had remained hidden for centuries. Now its silence had been broken. And Lord Commander Garrick had come, not to remember the past, but to claim whatever power still slept beneath the mountain. The first sound was not the clash of swords. It was the cry of the wolves. Hundreds of voices rose together from the hidden valley, filling the mountain with a mournful chorus that echoed through every stone corridor. The ancient halls, silent for centuries, seemed to answer them. Tiny cracks spread across the carved walls, sending dust drifting into the lantern light like grey snow. Mira stood frozen beside the crystal basin. The water, once clear enough to reflect the stars above, had become as black as midnight. Slow ripples crossed its surface. Not from falling stones. From something moving far below. The monk closed his eyes. "It remembers his death." Mira looked toward him. "No." His voice was heavy with sorrow. "It remembers mankind's betrayal." The thunder of breaking stone grew louder. One after another, the outer gates collapsed beneath heavy iron hammers. Ancient locks that had guarded the sanctuary for hundreds of years shattered beneath human greed. The monk tightened his grip on his weathered staff. "We cannot allow Garrick to reach the prison." Mira glanced toward the narrow passage leading deeper into the mountain. "What prison?" "The one Aldren gave his life to guard." The old man's eyes remained fixed upon the dark water. "If those seals are broken completely." He never finished the sentence. He did not have to. The mountain answered for him. A deep roar rolled beneath the earth. Not the voice of a beast. Something older. Something without mercy. Even the wolves outside fell silent. Rowan hurried to the entrance chamber and peered through a narrow opening in the stone. His face lost its color. "They're everywhere." Mira joined him. Dozens of torches danced below in the darkness. Soldiers poured through the ancient corridors like a river of steel. Some carried ropes. Others dragged strange wooden crates reinforced with iron. Behind them walked Garrick. Unlike his soldiers, he moved slowly, patiently, as though he already believed victory belonged to him. He paused before one of the carved walls. His gloved hand brushed away centuries of dust. The image beneath showed King Aldren standing beside a great silver wolf beneath a sky filled with stars. Garrick sneered. "So this is the lie." One frightened soldier whispered, "My lord, perhaps we should leave." Garrick turned sharply. "After searching half my life." His voice echoed through the chamber. "There is no curse. There is only power." He looked toward the darkness ahead. "And today it becomes mine." The monk led Mira and Rowan through a hidden passage concealed behind the ancient throne. The tunnel was narrow, forcing them to walk in single file. The walls glowed faintly with veins of pale blue crystal. As they descended, the air became warmer. The scent of damp earth replaced the clean smell of pine. Far below, a rhythmic sound echoed through the darkness. Boom, boom, boom. Like the slow heartbeat of a sleeping giant. Mira could feel it through the soles of her boots. "What is that?" The monk answered quietly. "The prison." Hours seemed to pass beneath the mountain. Finally the tunnel opened into a vast underground cavern. Mira stopped breathing. The chamber was larger than any castle she had ever imagined. An underground lake stretched across the darkness, its still waters reflecting thousands of glowing crystals hanging from the ceiling like frozen stars. At the center of the lake rose a lonely island. Upon it stood an enormous stone arch wrapped in countless silver chains. Each chain was thicker than the trunk of an ancient oak. Every link shimmered with strange golden symbols. The air around the arch rippled gently, as though invisible fire burned there. The monk bowed his head. The final seal. Mira stared in silence. So Aldren guarded this place alone. For 700 years. She felt her chest tighten. No throne. No family. No laughter. Only endless duty. Only loneliness. Only sacrifice. Before anyone could move closer, soft footsteps echoed behind them. They turned. The great grey wolf from the hidden valley emerged from the darkness. Then another. Then 5 more. Soon nearly 20 wolves surrounded the travelers. The oldest wolf stepped toward the stone arch. Its cloudy eyes rested upon the chains. Slowly, almost reverently, it lowered itself to the ground. One after another, every wolf did the same. The monk smiled sadly. They came to keep their promise. What promise? That no guardian would ever stand alone again. Mira's eyes filled with tears. Even after centuries, the wolves had remembered. A deafening explosion shattered the silence. The cavern shook violently. Dust poured from the ceiling. The hidden passage behind them collapsed inward. Torches appeared among the falling rocks. Garrick had found them. His soldiers spread quickly across the cavern, raising crossbows toward the wolves. The animals did not attack. They simply stood between the soldiers and the ancient chains. Like living shields. Garrick laughed. So this is your legendary army. He slowly walked toward the final seal. The wolves growled softly. Not with rage. With warning. He ignored them. I've heard stories about this place since I was a child. He looked toward Mira. They said only monsters guarded it. His smile widened. They were right. He lifted one hand. Kill them. Crossbows fired. The cavern erupted into chaos. Bolts flew through the glowing air. Several wolves collapsed immediately. Others leaped forward, not to kill, but to protect the wounded. Rowan cried out as a young white wolf threw itself in front of him, taking an arrow meant for the boy. The animal stumbled. Its legs shook. Still it remained standing. Mira rushed forward and caught the wolf before it fell. Warm blood soaked through her sleeves. The frightened creature looked into her eyes. There was no anger there. Only trust. Only pain. Tears blurred her vision. Please. She whispered. No more. The monk planted his staff firmly against the stone floor. His voice rolled across the cavern. Garrick. The commander turned. You still have time. Leave this place. The seal still holds. Do not awaken what your pride cannot control. Garrick's expression never changed. You mistake me for a frightened old king. He removed a long object wrapped in black cloth from one of the iron crates. Slowly he uncovered it. An enormous war hammer appeared. Its head was forged from dark metal unlike anything Mira had ever seen. Crimson lines pulsed beneath its surface like glowing veins. The monk's face turned pale. The breaker's hammer. Garrick smiled. It belonged to the last king who dared challenge the Guardian. He rested it across one shoulder. It has waited centuries to finish what he began. The old monk stepped forward alone. You cannot win. I don't need to. Garrick answered calmly. I only need to break the chains. He charged. The hammer crashed against the stone. The cavern exploded with light. The first silver chain snapped. Its sound echoed like a bell across the underground lake. Every wolf howled at once. The mountain shook so violently that enormous rocks crashed into the water below. Golden light burst from the broken chain before fading into darkness. Mira felt the mark upon her hand burn for the first time. She gasped. The glowing symbol beneath her skin shone through her glove. The monk saw it immediately. It has chosen you. Before she could ask what he meant, Garrick swung the hammer again. A second chain shattered. Then a third. The air grew colder. The crystals above began losing their light one by one. Darkness spread across the cavern. Something enormous moved behind the ancient arch. Not a body. A shadow. It flowed like living smoke, stretching between the broken chains. The underground lake rippled violently. Every lantern went out. Only the glowing mark upon Mira's hand remained bright. The monk turned toward her. His voice was calm despite the chaos around them. "Listen carefully." She nodded. "You cannot stop this with strength." "I know. You cannot stop it with hatred." "I don't have any." He smiled gently. "Good." He placed both hands upon her shoulders. The Guardian did not choose the strongest heart. He chose the kindest. Behind them, another chain broke. The roar that followed shook the entire mountain. The shadow pushed farther through the opening. It had no face. No eyes. Only endless darkness swallowing every light it touched. Trees above the mountain withered instantly. Snow turned grey. The underground water blackened. The wolves backed away, their ears flat against their heads. Not because they feared death. Because they recognized the enemy their ancestors had fought for centuries. The monk closed his eyes. "I can still delay it." Mira's heart tightened. "What do you mean?" He smiled the way an old grandfather smiles before sending a child safely home. "My journey has always led here." "No." She shook her head. "There must be another way." "There isn't." He looked toward Rowan. "Protect her." Then toward the wolves. "Stand with her." Finally he looked at Mira. "When hope begins to fade." His tired eyes reflected the last remaining light. "Remember why you buried him." Before she could stop him, the monk walked toward the shattered seal alone. He raised his ancient staff. Golden light burst upward around him, brighter than the stars reflected in the underground lake. The wolves lifted their heads. The mountain trembled. And Garrick watched with a smile that slowly disappeared as he realized. The old man had never intended to survive. The golden light surrounding the old monk rose like the first sunrise the mountain had seen in centuries. It spread across the shattered cavern, washing over broken stone, wounded wolves, frightened soldiers, and the endless shadow pouring through the ruined seal. For one breathtaking moment, every sound disappeared. The roaring stopped. The falling rocks hung suspended in the glowing air. Even the black smoke twisting from the broken prison seemed to hesitate. The monk stood alone before the ancient arch. His worn grey robes fluttered gently although no wind remained. He looked neither frightened nor angry, only peaceful, like a traveler who had finally reached the end of a very long road. He planted his staff firmly against the stone. Golden cracks spread outward beneath his feet, racing across the cavern floor until they reached every remaining silver chain. The mountain answered with a deep, mournful hum. Then the light burst outward. A wave of warmth swept through the underground kingdom. The shadow recoiled violently. It twisted and hissed without a voice, shrinking away from the brilliance surrounding the old man. Several wolves struggled back to their feet. The wounded white wolf beside Mira lifted its head once more. For the first time since the battle began, hope returned. Garrick's expression hardened. "No." He gripped the breaker's hammer with both hands. "I did not come this far to lose everything to an old fool." Ignoring the blinding light, he charged. Each step echoed like thunder. The monk never moved. At the last possible moment, he simply raised one trembling hand. The golden light wrapped around Garrick like invisible chains. The commander stopped so suddenly that cracks spread beneath his boots. He fought against the unseen force with all his strength. Veins swelled across his neck. His armor groaned. Still, he could not take another step. The monk spoke quietly. "You have spent your life chasing power." His gentle voice carried through the enormous cavern. "But power without mercy has always belonged to darkness." Garrick laughed through clenched teeth. "Mercy built no kingdoms." "No," the monk replied. "But it saved them." The commander's roar shook the chamber. With a desperate cry, he lifted the breaker's hammer high above his head and slammed it against the glowing chains. The final silver link snapped. The sound that followed did not resemble breaking metal. It sounded like the sky itself had torn apart. Darkness exploded from the ancient prison. It did not rush. It flowed, like an endless tide swallowing every ray of light before it. The cavern trembled violently. Crystal formations shattered overhead. The underground lake rose in towering waves. The shadow climbed into the air until it filled the vast chamber like a living storm. Where it passed, flowers withered. Stone blackened. Torches died. Even the soldiers who had followed Garrick so proudly stumbled backward in terror. Some dropped their weapons. Others fell to their knees, covering their faces. The darkness had no eyes. Yet everyone felt it watching them. Searching them. Feeding upon every fear they had ever buried inside their hearts. One young soldier screamed as black mist wrapped around his arm. His eyes turned empty. He lifted his sword and attacked the man standing beside him. Another followed. Then another. Within moments, Garrick's own army had turned against itself. The shadow needed no claws. Hatred was enough. Mira clutched the wounded white wolf against her chest. The glowing mark upon her hand burned hotter than fire. Golden light seeped through her fingers, spreading across the wolf's silver-white fur. Its bleeding slowed. Its breathing steadied. The animal blinked weakly before gently pressing its nose against her wrist. The monk looked toward her. His smile returned. "Now." His voice was barely louder than a whisper. "You understand." Compassion. That had always been the gift. Not strength. Not magic. The power to heal what fear had broken. The shadow surged toward the old monk. He did not step away. Instead, he closed his eyes. A peaceful smile settled across his weathered face. Then the light surrounding him became so brilliant that Mira had to shield her eyes. The entire mountain shook. A single tear slipped down Rowan's cheek. The wolves lowered themselves to the stone floor. One by one. Every single one. The light slowly faded. When Mira looked again, the monk was gone. Only his wooden staff remained, standing upright where he had been. Its weathered surface had become a young green tree, its roots sinking into the ancient stone. Fresh leaves unfolded despite the darkness surrounding it. Life had answered sacrifice. The wolves released one long, mournful howl. Not in despair. In gratitude. The shadow roared. Without the monk's light holding it back, it expanded rapidly. Black mist poured from the broken seal and climbed toward the opening high above. Far beyond the cavern, the mountain split apart. Across the kingdom, people looked toward the northern peaks in horror. Dark clouds swallowed the sky. Rivers turned black. Fields withered before the eyes of frightened farmers. Birds abandoned their nests. Animals fled the forests. Winter itself seemed to lose its color. The kingdom was beginning to die. Garrick stood beneath the swirling darkness. At first, he smiled. He stretched out one armored hand. "I command you." The shadow drifted toward him. "I freed you." Black mist wrapped around his body. His smile widened. For one heartbeat, he believed he had succeeded. Then the darkness entered him. His scream echoed across the mountain. His armor cracked apart. His eyes filled with endless black. The crimson cloak fell from his shoulders as the shadow swallowed him completely. When he finally stood again, the proud commander was gone. Only an empty shell remained. His voice no longer sounded human. "You opened the gate." The words came from somewhere far deeper than his own throat. "Now, you belong to me." Rowan stepped closer to Mira. "What do we do?" She looked at the glowing mark. It pulsed gently beneath her skin. Not urging her to fight. Urging her to remember. She closed her eyes. The answer had been with her since the beginning. Not inside the mountain. Not inside the prison. At the grave. She had expected nothing. Asked for nothing. She had buried a lonely wolf simply because it was the right thing to do. Compassion had awakened the ancient promise. Perhaps compassion alone could restore it. She opened her eyes. "I know where this ends." Leaving the battle behind, Mira began climbing toward the surface. Rowan followed without question. The wolves surrounded them, forming a living shield as they raced through collapsing tunnels. Stone crashed behind them. Ancient bridges fell into darkness. The mountain groaned with every passing heartbeat. At last they emerged beneath the cold night sky. The summit lay ahead. The lonely pine still stood proudly against the wind. Snow covered the little grave exactly as Mira had left it. The small wooden wolf still watched over the resting place of the Guardian King. Around it, thousands of wolves waited. Grey, white, black, old, young. The mountainsides had become rivers of silent fur stretching farther than the eye could see. None moved. None howled. They had already gathered. As though they had known this moment would come for centuries. Above them, green and violet curtains of northern light danced across the heavens. The stars themselves seemed to pause. Behind Mira, the mountain exploded. The shadow burst from the shattered summit, towering above the peaks like a storm given life. Within its darkness stood Garrick's broken form, his empty eyes glowing like dying embers. The creature raised one enormous arm. The mountains trembled. Entire cliffs collapsed into the valleys below. The wolves did not run. Neither did Mira. She stepped quietly toward the lonely grave. She knelt. Her fingers brushed away fresh snow until the carved wooden wolf appeared once more. The glowing mark upon her hand touched the little carving. Warm golden light flowed into the wood, then into the earth, then through the roots of the ancient pine. The mountain fell silent. Every wolf lifted its head. The wind stopped. Even the shadow hesitated. A heartbeat later, the grave began to shine. Soft golden light spread across the snow. The earth gently opened. Not with violence, with peace. A familiar silver figure slowly rose from the glowing light. The great wolf stood once more. His silver fur shimmered brighter than moonlight upon fresh snow. The scars were gone. The broken spear had vanished. His golden eyes held endless kindness. He walked toward Mira. She reached out with trembling fingers. The wolf lowered his head. Their foreheads touched. The moment their skin met, brilliant light surrounded them both. The silver wolf slowly changed. Fur became flowing white robes. Strong paws became steady hands. Before her stood King Aldren exactly as he had appeared in the ancient visions. His silver hair moved gently in the still air. A simple crown of woven branches rested upon his brow. He smiled with quiet gratitude. Not a word passed between them. None was needed. He placed one warm hand over the glowing mark upon hers. The light became brighter than the stars. Across the mountain, every spirit of every guardian who had ever stood beside Aldren appeared among the wolves. Kings, queens, children, old shepherds, hunters, healers, ordinary people whose courage had never been written into history. They stood together beneath the northern lights. Not as rulers, as protectors. The wolves moved beside them. No chains, no fear, only trust. Aldren looked toward the towering darkness. Then back at Mira. He bowed. Not because she was a queen. Because she had reminded the world what a true guardian looked like. Mira stepped forward. She lifted her glowing hand toward the sky. I return the promise. Her quiet words drifted across the mountain. Not through fear. Not through power. But through kindness. The golden light burst upward. Thousands of wolves held together. The spirits raised their hands. The ancient pine spread glowing branches across the heavens. The light surrounded the darkness. Not attacking it. Healing everything it had poisoned. The black storm fought wildly. It tore through cliffs. It roared across valleys. Yet everywhere the golden light touched, forests bloomed again. Snow became pure white. Frozen rivers sparkled beneath the stars. The darkness had fed upon hatred. Compassion left it nothing to consume. Slowly, painfully, it began to fade. Garrick's empty body collapsed onto the snow. The shadow dissolved into countless tiny fragments of black mist before disappearing forever into the night. Silence returned. Morning arrived beneath clear blue skies. The mountains no longer shook. Fresh water flowed once again through every stream. Green shoots pushed through melting snow. Birdsong echoed from forests that had seemed dead only hours before. The wolves remained until sunrise. Then, one by one, they disappeared peacefully into the wilderness. Not fleeing. Simply returning home. Aldren's spirit stood beside Mira one final time. The first rays of sunlight passed through him like morning mist. His smile never faded. Then he became countless tiny lights drifting upward into the brightening sky. The Guardian King had finally gone home. Weeks turned into months. The scars upon the kingdom slowly healed. Ashen Hollow was rebuilt, not with fear, but with helping hands from every neighboring village. People no longer told children stories about monsters living in the mountains. Instead, they spoke of a king who had loved his people so deeply that he became their guardian long after his own life had ended. Hunters left offerings beside forest trails each winter. Travelers shared food with hungry wolves instead of reaching for their weapons. Stone monuments were raised, not to celebrate battles, but to honor sacrifice. And every spring, families climbed the mountain together carrying white flowers. They always stopped beneath the lonely pine. The simple wooden wolf still stood there, untouched by wind or snow. Fresh wildflowers bloomed around the grave every single morning, even during the coldest winters. No one ever discovered who placed them there. Some believed the mountain itself remembered. Others smiled and said the wolves had not forgotten. Mira never accepted titles. She never wore a crown. She remained a healer. She planted gardens where fires had once burned. She mended broken bones. She comforted grieving families. And whenever frightened children asked whether monsters were real, she would gently take their hands and lead them to the forest's edge. There, if they waited quietly enough, a great grey wolf sometimes stepped from the trees. It never came too close. It simply lowered its head with quiet respect before disappearing back into the mountains. The children always smiled, because they understood something their grandparents had forgotten long ago. The greatest monsters were never the ones with fur and fangs. They were the ones who buried kindness beneath fear. And sometimes, all it took to save an entire kingdom was one gentle soul willing to give a lonely wolf the dignity of a grave.